This podcast is for people who know that the workplace can and should be better and are ready to do something about it. You will learn practical ways to change organizational cultures and human behavior without buzzwords, without box ticking, without performative leadership. I am the boss of Prina Shah Consulting, working with executives, leaders, and teams to create work cultures and environments that actually work for people. I am Prina Shah. I specialize in organizational culture change and human behavior change. I am all about making work better with people who give a damn. So if you think I can help, contact me via LinkedIn. I am here to help you to find decent ways to change the workplace. Let's do this. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Ways to Change Your Workplace podcast with myself, your host, Prina Shah. And I'm very excited to bring to you today some people who are in the elite spectrum of all things change management. Doug Wolfson, all the way from Sydney, and Janine, Ellison, all the way from Sydney as well, who are both the founders of Rethink Change, which is a conference, it's a community, it's something else. Welcome. How are you both?
Very well. Thanks, Prina.
Doug, it is great to have you on today as well. Now, first and foremost, Doug, before you joined, Janine and I had a little chatter about all things Rethink Change. And I just want to know, so both of you have created this conference event series. Where did this idea come from?
So like many things in life, it just happened.
It just happened.
Yeah, it just happened. This probably started off as a passion project that went through some ups and downs. Yeah. And we're 5 years into it. And now it's call it a business or a side hustle. Yeah. But it's something more sustainable. Like you said, that we have built a little bit of a community and a reputation for delivering some learning type events and networking. Yeah. And we're still going.
Amazing. Amazing. How did this come about? What was the seed? What made you do this?
So the seed will go back and forth. Janine will have a view on this as well. But this was, we first started the concept or the idea right around the time of COVID. So dialing it back to the times when we were running out of toilet paper and we were worried about everything and didn't know what was happening at the time. After the first lockdowns, Janine and I, who had worked together and have known each other for a number of years, we're meeting for a social drink in the CBD of Sydney. And after a few drinks, we said, this is fantastic to get back together. This is a time, when people have been working in isolation to some degree. Yeah. And we hatched an idea that we would try to bring a number of people together with some kind of function. And I think we initially called it a forum. And we would tap a number of our friends or colleagues on the shoulders to say, would you speak? And just have a session where we get people together. I don't know if we thought it would be a full day or a half day, but that was the initial conversation. What we then did, we invested our time and money into booking. We'd never done anything like this of an actual, I think we called it a change forum, to happen in about 3 months' time. And we started to get these 6 people on board to have a full day event. And what happened, I think soon after, correct me if I'm wrong, Janine, but we actually advertised for the event and then there was another shutdown. Oh. And so we, when people weren't meant to be back in businesses, so we actually had initiated this thing. We had actually started, I think we sold even a few tickets at that point. Is that right, Janine?
Yeah. We spent a lot of time negotiating with the venue. Oh, the stop-starts. Yeah.
And during that time, it just got postponed quite a few times before we had our first event.
Oh, and gosh, 5-6 years down the line. Janine, what was the impetus for you? Why did you need to create this community? Why did you need to partner with Doug to do this? Over the drink, what happened there?
Yeah, I'm pleased Doug threw in a few of the themes. So yes, there was a glass of Malbec involved. I think there was some real defining moments for me. The one is I am an extrovert. I get my energy from people. And I was really feeling the isolation of not connecting. And it's an amazing community who are so generous in sharing and experiences, but also playing with ideas on how we can navigate through some of the change challenges. And I was really feeling that. So the reconnect, and actually, if you remember, the first conference was called Rethink and Reconnect. So the reconnect was all of us going, oh, we just need some human contact, let go of the poor dog. And then the rethink was, it was becoming at that point really obvious that everything was changing. And the challenge of how do we implement something that had always been done face to face, very little digital engagement, etc. How are we going to deliver these changes with the same outcomes, level of community and connection in this hybrid environment?
Yeah.
And so that was the rethink. The rethink was all about, wow, we've moved hybrid, the world has shifted.
Right.
And, Doug and I spent a lot of time over our second or third glass of wine saying, and we suspect we're not going to go back. So that was becoming, a little bit more apparent. And then the reconnect is just bringing community back together. And that thread has continued, as you say.
Hasn't it just, as someone who's experienced the conference itself. So I applied to speak at the conference last year as a keynote, and you said, no, do a masterclass, a 3-hour masterclass instead. So that was just beautiful. And the people who attend the conference are just passionate change leaders or, involved in change in some way or another. And just the breakout conversations and lunches and, you host this beautiful dinner for all of the presenters the night before as well. The way you enable us, you create these experiences to enable us to really get to know each other, to continue the conversation afterwards as well. So it's not just a set and forget, let's go there, learn this. I've made friends that I'm still in touch with, WhatsApp groups and whatnot now. So thank you. That is something else, to have an event experience, which is just brilliant, but then continues on afterwards. That is something else.
Yeah. Now, thank you for that. That it's it really. Yeah.
That's the truth. That's the truth. So while we're talking about rethink change, so obviously we needed to rethink change, in the times of the pandemic, we needed to reconnect. You've been continuing on with the brand of Rethink Change, which I think is really needed and very much marries with, ways to change your workplace, which is what this podcast is called. So in today's time, why do we need to rethink change, in your opinions?
Doug, do you want to jump in?
Well, I'll give you a bit of a caveat as well. So Janine, I know that you work internally within a traditional job. And Doug, you have your own business. You'll be coming with different lenses, I imagine, as well. Janine, your thoughts as an internal person, why do we need to rethink change?
Because I think the environment is constantly changing. Yeah. And one of the things that we spent a bit of time doing this year is we did a whole lot of analysis based on feedback we've received from our participants and our presenters. So we almost had over 1,000 data points. Wow. And what we've identified is each year there's been different themes or trends that have been prevalent. And the most interesting data point is actually the submissions we receive. So in the early days, it was absolutely hybrid COVID. Yeah. Then we moved to psychological safety. So there was a real predominance of that.
Okay.
Then we moved into psychosocial.
Uh-huh.
And of course, AI started feeding in. And last year, there was a lot of AI. What we've seen this year, which is fascinating, and while we almost could have filled 4 masterclasses and 20 presenters with it, is the constant volume of change.
Yes.
And how in organizations can we support our people navigate through this relentless volume? And what does it mean to our leaders? What does it mean to how we execute and embed? So I suppose that's the long answer, Prina, to your question of there is always something to rethink.
Oh, continually. I love that. And the themes that you really pick out each year are very poignant to what's happening right now within the change landscape. And, my background's in the organizational development world as well. And OD people completely nerd out on everything that you train us on as well. So, Doug, from your external view, so as a consultant, what kind of things are you coming across? I love the story that, Janine just said. So we went from psychological safety to psychosocial to AI. And now the constant rapid pace of change as well. What are you coming across?
Good. So just dialing it back a little bit, I just say as a continuous learner, right? And
Yes.
probably in yourself in your podcast, is that we should always keep reflecting. So a lot of the models and the approaches out there are still sound.
Yeah.
So not necessarily suggesting throw things out and reconsider.
Correct.
So there's the element of, and this comes back to what we have tried to build within Rethink Change, is there are lots of good operators out there.
Yes.
But sometimes if we look at what people are doing through case studies and different approaches, you might just reflect and modify and tinker.
Yes.
You don't have to throw everything out. So we're not suggesting that, a lot of what people are doing, I wouldn't say is not correct or is broke. Is just can take learnings from other people and reconsider and then put that back into the mix and how I might approach change. So like Janine had mentioned, there are a number of kind of externalities that have come in of, say, some of the, thinking about, psychological safety or psychosocial kind of risk. But you put that back into the mix of the way that we approach kind of change. You're now thinking about AI. And how do you put that in there? You don't have to throw it out,
No.
But how do you then integrate that into the way that you work? And what we've tried to do with Rethink Change, I believe, is leverage the really good operators out there, like yourself, Prina, to just say, here's someone that's tried something from a slightly different lens. And then our attendees or the people in the community can say, oh, I might take some of that on board and think about how I might approach it. But it's always good when you think about a new approach to always anchor it to some examples. And that's what
Yes.
our presenters or the people in the community bring, right? It's not just theory, but
Yeah.
it's an approach. And let me show you how I did it. Let me give you some examples.
Yes. And you're taking me back to last year. And it's all of the talks I loved, but the real case studies, was it Hydro Water, Tasmania?
Yes.
Oh, what a tag team they were. The presentation, the case study, and the amount of sharing that they actually did as well, in terms of what went well, what didn't go well as well, and the truth telling as well aspect of the stuff that people often don't share was so invaluable, I would have to say.
Yeah, and again, we have a very generous community within the change management kind of discipline.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what Janine and I have tried to foster, is that we leverage people within that community to share with others. And turning things back a little bit, when we first went into that rethink and reconnect, one of the fundamental parts that Janine brought in that year is we set up a whole mentoring kind of program that we tried to link people. We did a little bit of that at our last year's conference as well. But there's a lot to learn. I mean, we know this from, just good learning methods, is we learn from each other, not necessarily from going to an event. And so if we can pair people up with other people within the organizations,
Yes.
that's
Win-win. Win-win. Absolutely so. Well, why do you think change has become such a loaded thing in the workplace? We've talked about the rapid pace of change. Any other reasons? I mean, you work within the change world, daily.
I think for me, it's an emotional word.
Yes.
So if you think as humans, what we strive to do is achieve stability, certainty,
Yep.
and change disrupt this equilibrium.
Yeah.
A nature of that is what it does. And so when we talk about change at work, we, in addition to the emotional challenge, it also triggers fear.
Yes.
So I was thinking the other day, if we go all the way back to Kubler-Ross and the grief curve and the change curve, that was all about fear and loss, grief,
Loss.
which is why we modified the grief curve, and it works perfectly for change, as we've all been playing with forever.
Oh, yes.
And what happens is that when we trigger this word of change, people start going, is this about job security? Is this about a new manager? Is it about AI is going to take my role? So we
Yes.
always become very much more contextual. So that's why it's so important to be accurate on what's changing and why it's changing.
Yeah.
And the being specific in information will help Janine go, actually, this isn't AI taking my job. This is a new work process. And, as much as we can support people back into the rational mindset and out of the emotional.
Absolutely.
So I think change is just an emotionally triggering word.
Completely so. I'll give you an example. So I had my lovely, at that time, she was 16 years old, my niece doing work experience with me. And I just thought, I'm so flattered you want to do work experience with me. So I thought, I'm going to take her to the good stuff and the boring stuff as well. The good stuff. I was running a workshop on change management for a number of health leaders, in the health sector. And they were all just panicking about this change. She didn't know in detail what the change was about. So this 16-year-old, during the break, says to me, but I go through change every single day. It's a normal part of life, isn't it? Can't we just tell them that this is all okay? So looking at it from a child's eyes compared to an adult's lens where it's so much more loaded, like you've just said, in terms of, it might be AI taking my job or my job might change. It's that lack of security that we have as well. So then in that respect as well, the importance of change managers to be extra careful in the way that they land the messaging, the way that they work with their internal stakeholders, communications, all of that kind of stuff is just something else, isn't it? So needed.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you say we can just tell them it's okay. And you're right, that's probably a 16-year-old.
16-year-old.
I've got to give that. But interesting enough, and this is probably about like 3 years ago, I had an executive say when there were some real problems, and I would call it, went back more to the design. Things weren't designed very well. So if they had better change management earlier, they may have considered with an end user lens of how we make it. But to get through the problems, there was a comment by one of the executives to say, well, we can just change manage it, which was essentially, we can tell them it's okay, and we're going to convince them by saying, and we'll fix these other little things. But it was a broken solution in a sense. The idea from the executive was to, through some communications and some workaround training, to pretty much tell them it would be okay. But the expression they use is, coming back to your point, was that you can just change manage it. And so, yes, some people it's a loaded word.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. So while we're talking about loaded, that there's two kind of people who work on change within the workplace. Usually, my internal experience has shown me that you either have change managers or project managers, and they're different breeds of people. Can we also talk to that? I have an opinion on it. Do you have an opinion on change managers versus project managers and the differences within? Janine or Doug?
I'll jump in because, I think it's a healthy tension.
Yeah.
I think there's a role for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really it's a bit of that push-pull. But the most important part in this conversation for me, Prina, is to make sure that the change manager is brought in early. And that's for a lot of reasons, that if they're brought in later, they're just there to tick the box to deliver.
Yeah.
If they're brought in early, it really is about, let's understand the solution. Let's make sure we're engaging the impacted audience, to Doug's point, so that we're actually building the right solution that picks up the idiosyncrasies of how things actually work here rather than what's documented.
Yeah.
So I think that early engagement also, and not so long ago, I had a conversation of, just because you can build the mouse in 2 weeks doesn't mean your people will be ready in 2 weeks.
Oh, yes.
And that goes into business cases. So the PM's going, wow, the quicker I can deliver this, the quicker I can move on to my next piece.
Correct.
And the change manager's going, there's a journey. We need to take people on. So not only do they pick up the mouse, but they know how to double click and they're committed to using it. So I think the no problems with PMs. It's a partnership. We've got work to do, but we need to respect each other. We need to understand the differences in our role and the responsibilities that we bring to those differences.
Absolutely. Doug, any insights from your perspective?
I would agree. The two different kind of roles, both very different in what they're trying to deliver, but the outcomes are the same. Yeah. So both want the same kind of outcomes.
Yeah.
Often you have people from different kind of skill sets that they bring. My own view is I would love if a lot more kind of project managers, program managers better understood change management principles.
Yeah.
You would probably have better outcomes, benefits realization around whatever that solution is with kind of the user adoption. And so I agree with Janine that earlier you get in someone that has that deep knowledge around change management, that's helpful.
Yes.
To get there. But we often focus on, again, that ultimate user adoption, which again, in the same outcomes, we're looking for benefits realization. It's not enough to have that elegant solution, because if people aren't using it or using it to its full capacity, you're not truly getting the benefits realization that may have been documented in a business case.
100%.
So,
yeah,
we're both aiming for the same place, but may have a slightly different lens, and it's good to have that tension.
Oh, definitely.
Sorry, the only thing I was going to add is sometimes we don't always aim for the same point. And one of the things and it amazes me that we're still having this conversation, is that projects finish at go live.
I know, but that's not the end of the project. No way. That's just the beginning, right?
The real work begins after go live.
Yes.
And it's almost like, hey, PM, if you've ticked your box, it's all good. I'm respectful to any PMs who are listening in. But actually, the adoption and changing the behaviors is where your benefits sit. And there's so many organizations that invest a massive amount in a business case and paperwork.
Yeah.
And getting the approvals, ticking the boxes. Yeah. And then they go live and they don't track it. They don't measure. They don't reinforce because they've moved on. And this conversation around the level of busyness in organizations, because our environment is just so diabolical and AI is just making us do more faster, that I think this is even more at risk than it was before.
Ooh.
That we're really going to throw things over the fence and run on to the next. But I don't know if you think the same. It's just
interesting. Yeah, juicy. When I worked internally in corporate, my best experience of working with project managers was they kept me aligned. They kept all of us aligned in terms of, this is the deadline, this is the date, this is, here are the project phases. So it really kept us on course for the project, right? The best experience I've had is when I was, as a change manager, able to input to the project manager to say, hey, I don't think they're ready from an organizational culture perspective. I don't think this is going to land yet. Could we just extend it for 1 more week or 2 more weeks? We need to add this element or that element to it. So I think project managers, they are the best at keeping things, on board and on process. Change managers, they bring the psychology, they bring the heart, they bring, the head. And I guess the what's happening on the ground and the feeling. I'm doing the feely fingers at the moment, anyone looking on video. The feelers out there. Often I find that the change manager or the OD person, I'm talking to OD people as well, because often they are the change manager in, lean organizations, been there, done that. So 2 different people, if they work well together, it is something else.
Yeah.
Okay. How does constantly poorly managed change then, in that respect, given we've got constant change happening, impact on trust, the relationship with yourself, and future projects?
So
You jump in, Doug.
for a lot of us, we've run into an organization you go into and we're already working against a perception around change because it could be that the last piece of work didn't go well. So poorly delivered programs, there's two things that happen. One, your leaders probably aren't learning unless they go back. And so then that may impact how they roll out the next one. But from a stakeholder point of view, I often hear from people, and a lot of people now these days understand change management, and they'll say, we don't do change management very well here. You know, the nature of my work where I go into different organizations, I hear that often. Having said that, I do think a lot of organizations are doing change management. There's a lot better understanding, program project managers, but especially leaders, they understand the concepts. They may not always know what to do, but they understand the concepts. In my experiences, they're more willing these days to listen, take some advice, and to participate in some of the roles that they need to play. Because at the end of the day, good change management is leaders leading change, right? So if we can get them in there, as opposed to some of the tactical things, to getting the leaders more involved, we'll have better outcomes. But we're definitely, the starting point is influenced by how it's been run before. And so there is often an awareness that change management has not been handled well in the past.
100%. Getting leaders involved is really, really important. And I'm so glad I've got both of your brains today. I want to talk to something which is cognitive dissonance. Okay. So cognitive dissonance is a feeling that, it's happening, but I don't actually believe in it. Therefore, it's that push and pull for me as a leader. And leaders are instrumental to any kind of change, as Doug has just said. How do you address cognitive dissonance within the workplace in a change environment?
I think for me, the leadership and the trust I almost feel like they're buckets. And I can see the challenge in this because we need our leaders to be credible and authentic and trusted, which means they need to believe it. Because a successful change is leader-led. We're in the background, we're enablers. One of my pet passions is that change management should never be the face of a project or a change.
Thank you.
And so if it's leader-led, good change, and if it's about trust, which to Doug's point, if we've got change, there's a bucket of change trust and dishonesty, poor expectations, didn't get what I thought I was getting. That kind of erodes the trust. And if we've got a leader standing up there, but he isn't authentically believing in what needs to be done, I haven't got the quick answer to this, but it's really challenging and it becomes a legacy for the next project and the next one. So maybe it's about we all need to challenge ourselves. If we're not behind something, why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Which is tough.
It is really tough. And have the conversation as well, right? Because I often find that, the middle managers of that meet in that sandwich of, the executive directed whatever change it might be. And therefore, I then have to deploy that change. If you don't understand it, if you don't believe it, go talk to your people. If you disagree with it as well, tell them. The ears are open, even though the decision may have been made. You can have influence. I think people forget that they have influence as well.
Yeah.
How much influence do you think we have? I'll put you on the spot. What do you think?
Well, let me walk away from the influence just for a moment. So coming back to the leader kind of support, like my experience is a foundation of any program, and even certainly the change management, is you need leadership alignment. So you may have a sponsor or a certain person that is key to this. But sometimes to make things work, the program may go across different business units.
Yeah.
And there's different impacts. And so sometimes there's winners and losers in change. And so you may have 6 out of 10 who are very supportive, and then another 4 that are, hanging on the fence because there may be some impacts to their world or to their processes or to their approach.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example in a large ERP program that worked on somewhat recently. A lot of the supply chain and finance leadership were fully on board, but the commercial teams were not. And the commercial teams, the reason being is that they would maybe have to limit some of the things that they could potentially sell because of the limitations of the back end. And so if you have a program, enterprise program where you need all the leaders on board, you need to make sure you get that right in the very beginning, because then what happens later in some programs is leaders then try to relitigate what it is they're trying to do. And you don't want that to happen at a later point. So the leadership alignment is really, really important up front. So then that way everyone knows what it is that they're trying to do. There's a common narrative. The messaging might be different, slightly in the different areas, but the leaders need to be on board in the very beginning. So what they say is what they believe.
Yeah.
And so you do have to surface those tensions early, Prina, like you were saying, so we know what those differences are and we resolve that. So when we go out, we're all speaking the same thing.
Oh my gosh. ERP projects, they can be the thing of nightmares, can they not? I've got a couple of clients working on ERP projects, and I'm doing change management training on the side. So from an ERP, let's delve a little bit deeper into the ERP, so enterprise resource something management system. So a whole system that's going to impact all of your workflows, whether it be finance, HR, the outside workforce, if you've got external workforce as well, have to do work a whole different way now. There's this big amount of panic that happens, like, oh my God, everything's going to change in the way that we work. So in the light of what you just said, Doug, bringing people in early, actually potentially showing them the system early as well. This is the missing piece I often find with ERP projects, for example, is that the decision makers will say, okay, well, we're going to go with this after this big procurement process, but they haven't brought in the right people to look at the system itself to say, well, would it actually work for this? Would it actually link with this? And that's when things eventually start to break down. And that's like 6-7 months down the line after you've kicked off the project as well, which just breaks my heart. But it can be eliminated if we bring them in early on, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And that's what human-centered design's always all about.
Yeah.
And it's been around for a long time now.
Has it not?
Doing HCD training with IDEO.
Yes.
15, 20 years.
Yeah.
I know that seems to be a very long time, but bringing in the impacted users right from the beginning to play with that solution, and bring in and the culture piece, Prina. I think if the solution bumps into a really strongly held culture norm, it doesn't matter how good your change is, there's a chance you're really going to find it difficult to land it, get adoption and sustainability. So this is also a good conversation around the differences between HR people, partners, and change.
Yeah.
Because I think most of us in those ERP projects really see this play out quite often, where HR is there to manage the organization's obligations to people. They're the SMEs. And then change comes in about the people journey towards adoption and integration. So it's, again, like the PM conversation, important partnership with clarity as to who's doing what.
Yeah.
But I think all up, and I'm sorry, I've taken us down a bit of a rabbit hole, but I think ERPs do often surface some of the bigger culture norms and challenges.
Very true. Very true. Now, Janine, I'm jumping back a little bit. You mentioned HCD, so human-centered design. So lots of people listening may not know what this is, but it has been here since the beginning of time, I feel, right? You mentioned an organization called IDEO, IDEO, however
Yes.
we pronounce it. They are beautiful. So anyone wanting to learn more about human-centered design, it is exactly what it is, as described. So human-centered design, how can I describe it? If I am building a toilet for women in a rural village in Africa, I am not just going to decide as Prina Shah, the change manager, this is where I should plonk the toilet. I'm going to go and live there with them. I'm going to live there in the morning, in the nighttime. I'm going to see if they've got any trouble. Is there any trouble in terms of walking to the bathroom? Is there any lighting issues? Is there anything else? So we have that bigger lens, right? Human-centered design opens up our eyes from a change perspective as to all of the factors that we need to consider. There's open source material out there that is free, which is just the best. Gosh, what have I been using? What kind of tools do they have? Help me out. Empathy mapping. Personas, all sorts of
Customer journeys.
customer journeys. Like, it's all out there, people. Please use it, right? It's free. Yeah, that's me on my high horse, by the way.
And I like to think that the nature of change management is human-centered design.
Yeah.
So even the way we do an impact assessment, that's actually about saying, what does this change mean for the human?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And impact assessments is maybe to start bringing in the empathy map stuff. So what is the emotional ask of a person going through this change? No? So rather where it started was process systems.
Yeah.
It was almost the tangibles. Now we push into some of the more emotive relational pieces. But really, a change manager who isn't people-centric is probably not meeting the responsibilities and the proposition of the role.
100%. 100%. Janine, I'm going to go back to something that you talked about, which is a really important thing. Post go live. Okay. The project is not over then. Can we just talk about post go live and the nuances and the needs of the organization and the people and everything else? So the project manager said, cool, we're live now. Project management's done. Now, what should a good change manager be focusing on?
So I like to think the first thing is it's not something new. So the business leaders, so say Doug implements a project and it goes into your world, Prina.
Yeah.
You would have been involved on the journey up until then. So it's not a surprise. Go live isn't, oh, wow, back to the mouse. Oh, wow, I've got a mouse. It's something you knew it was coming. You were a little bit ahead of that curve on how to use it so you can support your team. And so at go live, the change manager then maybe has checkpoints with Prina, the business or people leader. How are they going? What are the questions coming up? What are the support resources? Refresh training. We all love good FAQs. But I think one of the things, and look, I don't think any of us do this enough, is setting what success looks like really early.
Yeah.
And putting targets to it. So we've got a base to measure against, because when you're in it, post go live, you go, 2 out of 10 is good enough. But you may have set the target as 8 out of 10 when you started, in which case there's work to be done. So I think there's important processes of reinforcement, but again, supported by change managers, but truly owned by the business and the leaders.
Yeah. This part, I remember when I was working in corporate and working with brilliant project leaders, this part is the embedding into the organizational culture element post go live, right? That's the hearts, the minds of people. How have we tapped into them? How have they enabled this change to be received well? All of that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay.
So I think it's really important, like Janine said, you start early. So you begin with the end in mind.
Yes.
So, and the end in mind is not necessarily that go live period. of where you need to get to. So you start to think up front, what does success, how would we measure it?
Yeah.
And so you have to measure it the whole way through. And then after go live, so then you can readjust, reconfigure where you need to be. And there needs to be those reinforcement mechanisms. But we have to remember when we first start the process of expectation management to remind people that sometimes things get worse before they get better. And so
Yes.
there is that performance dip that often is around that time, a little bit before the go live, even during go live. And it may take a little bit of time even get back to that neutral state and then to achieve your benefits over time, because we don't want to give up too early. If somehow things aren't working, maybe that was always known that things would be a little bit harder before they got there, but we built up front in going back to that human-centric design. We understand how things may operate.
Yeah.
And so we're going to build in the mechanisms, reinforcement. It could be culture, like you were saying, Prina, those that may not be aligned there. So we have to figure out, whether there's some cultural, maybe there is some remuneration that may be required based on what's happening. We have to figure out in the beginning where we want to get to. And we put in a number of interventions, activities the whole way through, including post-go live.
Expectation management is so important, Janine.
Yeah, no, tell us, you one step ahead of me. I was one.
Unusual, yeah.
No. They talk about 70% of change projects fail. Now they've been throwing these numbers around.
All those stats, yep.
I wonder if it's more that they didn't deliver on expectations rather than they failed. And I wonder if it's everything you say, Doug. Don't you love this? I'm agreeing with everything you said. That actually sometimes we don't manage expectations well enough. And we almost want to sell the change.
Yes.
And we say, and it's going to do this, and it's going to do this. And particularly you see it in culture changes.
Yeah.
And then we're all going to behave like this, and it's all going to be fabulous, and we all love each other, and it's a fabulous, wonderful week at work. And we create those expectations. So then when we go live and culture change, my gosh, that takes months and years and
years. Yes.
And people go, well, you didn't deliver to my expectations, so I think this is a fail.
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of stuff, we really have to iterate to the people who are being impacted on the change. The change is not a linear journey. Like we won't go from here to there. It is that wiggly line that I talked about last year, that liminal space, the funky stuff. We go into depression, we go into chaos, we go into, oh my gosh, the system isn't working, the world is broken. But we do end up in a new world eventually. But it's that expectation management in between that is so, so important. Doug and Janine, is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you think that we should really be talking about in this conversation?
I think we've covered a lot, and there's a lot more we could cover.
Yes.
So I'm quite comfortable where we've gone.
Happy?
Again, I would say stay curious.
Yeah.
We can always learn from people around us, other experiences, and then experiment with the way that we perform our roles, and you learn what works.
Yeah.
There's so many good, concepts, books, other people to learn from. And again, that's something that, I'll go back to Rethink Change. That's what Janine and I, as an organization, we have tried to foster is trying to get lots of people together, much like you're doing here, Prina, on your podcast, of bringing in different ideas for people to just kind of chew on it, think about it, and how I might apply that.
Exactly. May I do a public service announcement to any change manager, any project leader, any organizational development person, any business analyst, anybody who gives a crap about change, please check out the Rethink Change conference, which happens in Sydney every year around May, June time.
Yeah, it's May. It's coming up in 3 weeks. If Doug and I look worn down, it's because we have 3 weeks to go.
Nearly there. And I've got serious FOMO this year because I'm not going to be there. But I have a last question that I ask all of my audience. If you had a magic wand, and I'm going to ask you 2 questions, so this is a question for each of you. If you had a magic wand, Doug and Janine, I'd like your separate answers. What is one way that you would change the way of the workplace? You could choose anything you want. I will ask Doug first.
Sure. So for me, I would love, and this is from a change management point of view,
Yes.
I would really like that more leaders were more educated and aware of some change management principles, because I happen to think they're good leadership disciplines, like a lot of things within change management,
Yeah.
that they would apply more of that in their day-to-day roles, but also in a program or transformation environment.
Beautiful. Janine, your magic
I
wand.
hate that he took my point. So now I'm under big pressure. So I think, and I was thinking about your language of turning change, will change manage them. Is that a verb? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, for me, I think it does build on Doug's point, but it's about everyone understanding that actually good change is a system. It's not a job. So really to move what is the ecosystem of organizations, we all have a role to play with that. It's not the job of a change manager.
No way. No way. And I love that you said earlier on, Janine, you're in the background. It's the leader. It's the people who are doing the change, right? You are, that person helping them behind the scenes. Beautiful. I cannot thank you both enough for this amazing conversation. Thank you. I'm gutted to be missing out next year, but I intend to be there next year.
And thank you, Prina. That was really enjoyable.
My
That's
pleasure.
great.
Pleasure talking with you.
All details about this episode are in the show notes. If you like this episode, I'd like you to take a moment and think about at least 2 people who might enjoy it. And please share the episode details with them too. Also, don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and on Instagram. I am Prina.Shah. See you there too.